Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. The rest of us might take a holiday, but The Rock does not. That's right, on New Year's Eve, he had a meeting with Warner Brothers CEO Kevin Tsujihara and tweeted about it, saying they were discussing a possible place for him in the DC Cinematic Universe, and that there would be badassery in 2014. I suspect he's referring not so much to a release date, but actual making of the badassery with a shoot. Now, some people speculated that maybe this was for Lobo again. His name has been mentioned a lot in relation to that character, Dwayne Johnson. And also, it made me think maybe he was being considered for the Green Lantern role. I think that with rumors of The Flash and Wonder Woman already being cast and Batman, Ben Affleck for Man of Steel 2, that we will be seeing some variation on the initial Justice League arc from the New 52 that they're already doing in the Justice League War animated movie coming out this year. It's 2014. So that means all of your Justice Leaguers will be cast. And I think, well, here's my thinking on this. Also, apparently there's a Doomsday-ish character. People who have seen the script know this. This is a very strong rumor. So potentially The Rock could play that role that Jason Momoa was maybe being considered for. Although who wants to, if Jason Momoa was being considered for a role, you would think The Rock would be above that. But I will say that, this casting is very tricky. Now, the one way they could go with it is, as we also might remember, DC said they were going to make those low-budget films every year, like 2 or 3 in addition to the big tentpole film. And The Rock could totally be starring in one of those. I actually think that would be a very good fit for him. But then at the same time, if they put him in this big Man of Steel 2 movie, or whatever it's going to be called, I have some concern that as much as I love The Rock, I actually watched G.I. Joe Retaliation yesterday out of desperation because I'd seen every other movie on demand, and it was actually a lot of fun. It was a very good guilty pleasure, and as long as you just turn your brain off, I actually really recommend it. It's not as good as John Carter. I was going to say there was also another film that didn't quite get its due, but it's certainly a good movie that I think you can watch if you too have seen every other movie on demand. But I do think that The Rock still has a little bit of, he's not, I think, a very respected actor. I think that he has still a lot of hits or misses. He had Snitch this year, 2013, really underperformed at the box office. Pain and Gain underperformed. And I don't think that he is the slam dunk with audiences that some studios might be thinking based on the success of G.I. Joe Retaliation and Fast and Furious. They're even considering a Fast and Furious spin-off for The Rock, but at the same time, I think he adds to the film's success and makes people another reason why they like it, but I don't think he is the primary reason that people like that. If you disagree with me, write down below. All you Fast and Furious fans, what brings you back to the films? Is it The Rock, or do you really go for like the Vin Diesel and sadly Paul Walker chemistry? I do feel that Vin Diesel is the true star of that franchise, Fast and Furious, and he even has a tough time outside of that. I don't know if I would trust Vin Diesel, although Marvel has cornered him, as we all know, and he also is tweeting about meetings. These guys like to tweet that they have meetings, and the Vin Diesel tweets turned into the group voiceover. They were kind of talking to him about a Phase 3 film, but I think so far the scheduling hasn't been able to work out. So I think that The Rock will end up somewhere likewise at the DC Cinematic Universe, perhaps even their answer to Vin Diesel. I think they just want him to be in one of their movies. But I would tell DC that they are really going for safe, almost old Hollywood casting bets. And I think that a better choice would be the more outside of the box casting that Marvel is doing, like Paul Rudd for Ant-Man. Or they should go back to what Nolan did so well for them. And also I think that Snyder did to some degree with Man of Steel with more cachet casting. Of course, Heath Ledger, very well respected after Brokeback Mountain. Gary Oldman as, Jim Gordon. Liam Neeson. Actually, I think Ra's al Ghul didn't work out because of the whitewashing of the character. Christian Bale even himself is a very respected actor when he took on that role. And likewise with Man of Steel, Lawrence Fishburne, Amy Adams, obviously. Michael Shannon might have done a really cheesy job in the movie, but he was very well respected as an actor and had a lot of serious, critical heat going into the film. And Russell Crowe, of course, I think a lot of people felt he would recapture kind of his gladiator glory. So I think that and that's why I like the Denzel Washington rumor so much, or potentially Bryan Cranston, whose name is being brought up again for a potential Lex Luthor maybe, or I know a lot of you want to see him as Jim Gordon, but that's the kind of actor I think Warner Brothers should be going after. I think if Warner Brothers let Marvel go for the outside the box comedy kind of things, and I think that DC's DC's sweet spot, to me at least, what I think they should be going for. I think Nolan hit the nail on the head, and I know a lot of you are sick and tired of hearing the name Nolan, but you have to admit he's the only one who's really succeeded in this area. Tim Burton did pretty well, but Batman Returns was largely rejected by audiences and critics, even though I really like it. It's actually, I think, after The Dark Knight, my favorite Batman film, and in some ways just as good with some of the elements of it. I really loved that version of Catwoman. But I feel that, they should be going for, serious cachet actors. The Warner Brothers movies should be the epic, serious, dark dramas, and let Marvel have the fun, and that way they can kind of coexist instead of cannibalizing each other. So I think The Rock is. I think The Rock, I'm sorry, as I said, I do like The Rock. I enjoy him in films, but I just think that he is kind of, The Rock is Lobo. That screams like Shaq is Steel. I think it's in the same vein. So that's my concern there. But hey, good for him. I got a lot of publicity out of that tweet, so it was very smart because there wasn't a lot of other stuff going on that day. But it was interesting to see that news with Marvel's first release of their Guardians of the Galaxy still, which was only a semi-big deal, I think, because leaked footage of that still had already hit the internet, so we'd already kind of seen that. And it was almost the exact version of the concept art that's been widely circulated. So I think it would have been nice to maybe see something a little bit different. But anyway, that got a lot of headlines too. So that's the first news story of the day. The second news story of the day is very interesting. It's a slow news week, obviously, but I think I found some good ones. And this is about the Chinese box office. The Chinese box office, obviously, as we've been talking a lot about here on the show, is doing very well. It is actually going so well that it is en route to compete with the U.S. box office for clout in terms of the box office percentage. Basically what it means is if a movie needs to be successful, it needs to succeed in those countries. So far, as I talked about in the top 10 box office list of the year, still America is crucial. Success in America is crucial to a film's overall box office success, but I think China is becoming another place that a film really needs to perform to get those dollars. So the China box office surged. It went to $3.6 billion this year, going up $760 million. But the interesting thing is that the growth didn't come from Hollywood imports, or Hollywood exports, I guess, if you're going to go from our perspective, but we'll talk about it from China's perspective. The growth didn't come from more Hollywood films coming in, but their own homegrown films, Chinese films doing quite well at the box office. 7 out of the 10 box office earners in China were Chinese films. And I think that's as it should be. Now, on the one hand, I think that, it could be argued that China isn't a particularly fair playing ground for Hollywood films. They don't compete evenly with the Chinese films. They really, a lot of times there's been complaints that the Chinese Film Commission will schedule 2 films, like I think it was Gravity and Hunger Games, on the same weekend, so they kind of eat each other alive, talk about cannibalizing. They have the same audience they're going after, so neither one does particularly well. I think that people have said, studios are saying that China's doing that intentionally. They'll only admit so many films. Hollywood has to compete and apply to get their films accepted to be released in China. And China really does try to make sure that their own films do very well. So there's that aspect. Also, there's pirating. There's been some problem that if a film comes out in other countries first, it'll be pirated, and most people in China will have seen it before it comes out there, is actually released in theaters. So that's another complaint the studios are having, saying, hey, maybe we would have had more than 3 out of 10 of those box office top performers, if we were able to compete effectively. But still, even though it might be an underhanded way, I think it's wonderful that China's own film industry is so vibrant and doing so well. And obviously, making movies, at the end of the day, China, or maybe I guess they could, can't force people to go and see these films, and they're still making a lot of money. I believe the top earner made about like $205 million or something like that in US dollars. So that's really great. And I think I would hate to see film homogenized. I think it's great that every countries have their own great film industries, and as it becomes a more global marketplace, more people want to get into making films, and maybe not dreaming of going to Hollywood immediately. I think it's still maybe the ultimate destination for a lot of talent, but building up strong careers where they are. Look at the guy who directs the Raid films. I believe he's like an Australian or New Zealander, and he decided to go to Indonesia to make movies instead of Hollywood, and he's doing quite well there, obviously. The Raid 2 trailer review will come out later today. But I think it's wonderful. I think it's very exciting, and I do have to say that as an American moviegoer, I wish that these foreign films would come here. I really wish on a wide scale that it wasn't so hard to find them when they do come. I think that would be great, and I think a lot of other countries have a really diverse offerings at their multiplexes, and here in America that's not the case. I don't mind subtitles. I would like to see these movies. I would like to see the most popular movie in China. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day, this is from a couple of weeks ago. I have like a backlog of stories I don't get to, the smaller ones, and so I thought today on a slow news day would be a great day to address it. And you might have heard this, but the Weinsteins, Bob and Harvey Weinstein have gotten access to their Miramax library through a deal. They now have the rights back to that, and they can start doing projects. And so they are very excited about that, and there are some very interesting choices being made. They're planning sequels to Shakespeare in Love and Rounders. I don't know who's asking for a Shakespeare in Love sequel, but I think a Rounders sequel, I mean, I know that film has a cult following, the Matt Damon, Edward Norton gambling film. And then also they want to do TV series out of Good Will Hunting, and also Flirting with Disaster, David O. Russell's second film that starred Ben Stiller. I think those are interesting ideas. I don't really know if these are franchise properties. I mean, I'm glad they got back into their Miramax library. I know that was a really big sore point for them. They were locked out of that by Disney and they had to go start the Weinstein Company. But I think Harvey Weinstein is obviously very shrewd, so let's see what he comes up with. But I'm interested. Are any of you excited? I mean, we talk about sequels all the time. Sequels are huge in Hollywood. So do you think that the Weinsteins can play the sequel game as well? Okay, the viewer question comes from Neil Mason. And he says, question, hi Grace, long-time watcher and first-time questioner, so I'll understand if you don't get around to this one. Surprise, I did, Neil. And Neil says, with Fox now retooling its X-Men franchise and Sony moving forward with its Sinister Six development, do you foresee a possibility that Fox and Sony may come together to allow Spidey to appear in the Fox Marvel universe in order to compete with Marvel's Avengers universe? It seems plausible for them to do this to reach the billion-dollar club more often, and with Fantastic Four being rebooted and talk of a possible X-Men crossover, reported that the other day. It wouldn't be implausible to see Spidey in with the Fox crowd, as he has had multiple appearances with both teams in comics and cartoon interpretations. What are your thoughts? Smiley face. Thank you, Neil. The reason I picked this question is because I think that a lot of people, and a number of you have been asking me about these competing cinematic universes. The Avengers Marvel really surprised Hollywood with their success, and now everybody's playing catch-up. Fox, DC, Warner Brothers, DC, and Sony. I think Sony is doing the best out of the group. We'll see how Fox does. I think Warner Brothers, I don't know. I think you could argue that maybe Warner Brothers is doing the best, but I think they're such, a cluster beep right now that I think it's hard they just kind of don't know which end is up right now over there, I feel. So, but they're very good at making headlines. So I'm not quite sure if I even would count them at this point. I think they're still kind of on the sidelines coming up with their plan. They're still called a timeout over there, I feel, to some degree. Just nothing concrete or solid has really come out. But we'll see. This is a very big gamble what they're doing with Man of Steel 2. But as to your question, Neil, I feel that actually it's more likely to see a Spidey Avengers crossover than it is to see a Spidey Fox crossover. And the reason I say is this. I think, Marvel Studios, I don't think has a great relationship with Fox as a studio. I think they probably don't like the fact that they have those properties that they had to sell to them, X-Men and Fantastic Four. And of course, as we discussed, it was another viewer question, I made a whole episode out of it, is that Marvel Studios is moving forward with the Inhumans as an answer to that, to kind of like, well, we'll just have our own mutants. And I think Fox probably won't take too kindly to that, because they're going to be like, you're encroaching on what we purchased from you. That's kind of like, not a great deal to do. Also, as you might recall, as I reported after the Avengers came out, that it was released that Sony was in talks with Disney to have the Oscorp Tower incorporated into the Avengers skyline of New York City. But it just wasn't done in time. They didn't have the time to do special effects-wise. I think the tower maybe wasn't designed, the Oscorp Tower, so they just didn't get a chance to put it in there. But those discussions were taking place, so that shows a friendliness there. Also, while I think that deep down Marvel Studios might hope that someday they get the rights to the X-Men and the Fantastic Four back, I don't think that will ever happen, but they did get the Punisher back and Daredevil, so they have those rights. Maybe not the Punisher, but they could get Daredevil back, as you can see, from Fox. So I think they feel, never say never. So I think that they're not going to want to help those movies. They're going to be like, let's just let Fox make such a big mistakes that they're like, well, we ruined it, we've broken it, we might as well sell the pieces back to Marvel maybe someday, Marvel Disney. But Spider-Man is never going back to, as I've said before, they not only purchased the film rights, but Sony owns part of the character. So that will never go away. And some of you even noticed that on an international trailer, the Disney logo appears in front of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 trailer. So I think you see synergy there. And then I think you have to think, what will Fox think, Neil, if that team up happens with Sony and Disney Marvel? That would be just astounding. I think a lot of people want to see that much more. And I think that Spidey, while he has got over with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, I feel he really is I think he is an Avenger, and he's often portrayed in those stories quite a bit. And I think people would love to see him swing into action with the Avengers. Andrew Garfield has even talked about it. So I think that is actually something we could see. I think that's not out of the realm of possibilities. Although the Avengers 2 seems so crowded, who knows when it will happen. But I think that Disney Marvel doesn't like having sold off any of their characters, but I think they have to come to terms with the deal they have with Sony with Spider-Man, because it's never going away. But with Fox, maybe they feel they can bleed him out. So that's my thoughts on your question. Great question, Neil. Thank you for being inspired to ask your first question. Thanks to everybody who asked a question. A viewer question episode purely dedicated to viewer questions is coming up next weekend. Not this weekend, but the second weekend of January. So look forward to that, I hope. And thank you for everybody for tuning in. And you can write down below what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions you might have. Although there's some chance it might not be a morning movie news tomorrow because there might be a snowstorm in New York City. I'm going to try to get to the office. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.